Hey, it's Jeremy from jeremy.net. So, someone who followed my work reached out to me on Instagram and they had asked me if I could take a look at a story that they were working on and give them my thoughts. Now, I don't usually look at other writers' work for the same reason that Marvel and DC comics don't accept unsolicited pitches. Because it's very, very possible that you might have an idea for a comic book, like let's say it's about unicorn ninjas or underwater drag racing or some crazy idea. And as unique as your idea may sound, somebody else might be working on a very similar concept. Now, the execution of that story may be very different from writer to writer, and like as we've seen from like Walking Dead to like all kinds of zombie comic books, there can be a wide number of executions of those ideas. But it doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't necessarily mean that people are copying each other just because they have the same basic premise. That said, the last thing I would want is to be working on a story and then someone else approaches me and they have a premise that's the same idea, and then either they think that I stole their idea when I published my book, or I end up for some reason shelving it because it's like, well, they're working on theirs right now. And the fact of the matter is that if I end up putting out a book and it's got the same concept as somebody else, their book is already out and mine's already out and we haven't had any contact, I'm like, go on with their bad selves. I hope that their idea is unique and interesting and I'm sure they're not going to tell the story the same way I would. So, I told them I'd be happy to look at artwork and give them feedback, but I couldn't look at any of their story writing. But that bothered me because I don't like telling people no when they ask for advice or asking for some thoughts or opinions. I mean, yeah, there's only so many hours in the day, and I have a lot of time that I have to spend working on my own comics, but I like to be able to help people whenever I can, because throughout my career, I've had a lot of people that took time out of their busy schedules to look at my artwork and give me feedback and help me along. So I was thinking about that, and I ended up writing them back with an additional thought after I'd already said that I couldn't look at any of the writing. And I thought that what I said might be useful to the rest of you. And the main thing I said was that for a lot of writers, for many writers, it really is hard to gauge whether a project is any good until it's completed. It's like inside our own heads, we're too close to it. And we go back and forth between thinking that our work is either awesome or it's crap. It's really, it's rare for most creatives to be like, well, it's all right. We're usually either really, really hard on ourselves or we're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And usually neither one is true. It's better to just actually get feedback from others. Now, I'd say the first question in terms of like starting an idea for a book is whether you love it enough to want to see it all the way through to completion. I mean, comics take months, weeks, years to finish, depending on whether you're doing a series or a graphic novel or a series of graphic novels. So that's the first thing is, are you really committed to something enough that you want to see it in the world and you're really willing to put in the work to create it? And then you just start creating. Now, it can take so much time to make these projects that you're like, well, you don't want to waste years and years on something that nobody cares about, nobody likes. So this video, the description is a little bit of a misnomer, because it's not about is your idea any good, but really, how do I find out if there's an audience for my idea? And that was something that I was thinking about when I went to the amazing Las Vegas Comic-Con a few weeks ago, and it was a great show. And I talked to a lot of people about my comic and pitched a lot of people, and I did pretty good in terms of sales-wise, but I also talked to a lot of people that even if they didn't buy the book, they really liked the idea and they were excited. They signed up for my mailing list. They're like, I want to hear more about this, so I'm going to look it up online. And people don't have to tell you that. People can just say, no thanks, or I'm not interested, or, Believe me, people have no problem saying no if it's something they're not interested in. But being able to get your book in front of people, it had me thinking about something that I mentioned in one of my earlier videos, and I'll put a link in the comments. It's a video I did earlier in the year called First Steps in Self-Publishing, where I talked about the first comic convention where I exhibited selling my own work. And one, I made an ashcan, which was a small booklet, and I go into a lot of depth about the ashcan in the First Steps in Self-Publishing video. But it was just a small booklet that had the first chapter of my comic. So one is actually having something there for people to physically look at and see how they react to it and see how they interact with it. But two is pitching the book itself. Actually standing in front of people who are complete strangers and describing your comic book. It is a 24-page issue, or it's a 4-issue miniseries, or it's a 200-page graphic novel about X. And X characters go through this experience, and, you don't necessarily tell them the whole story. In fact, you really want to tell them as little as possible. It's almost like you want to just give them the basic, this is what the book's about, in 4 to 6 sentences. Something you can sit there and tell somebody in 30 seconds. An elevator pitch. I'm sure you've heard the expression of, an elevator pitch where you're in an elevator with someone, you've only got a few floors to tell them whatever it is you're trying to pitch them. And, you want to keep your concept, your story, your pitch that short and that sweet. Definitely different from the rambling I'm doing right now. But what I really realized is that that's one of the greatest ways to get external validation, is getting in front of people and telling them your story. So if you have an idea and you're afraid of it not coming out well, afraid no one's going to be interested, no one's going to like it, you don't have to have the book done before you're pitching it to people. Maybe it's something where you just get some concept artwork done. If you're the writer, then maybe you team up with an artist, or maybe you hire an artist to draw 8 to 10 pages. And, maybe it's, if you're doing a whole graphic novel, maybe you get the first chapter drawn, or maybe you do a one-shot, a short story that takes place in the world that your ongoing comic book series, your graphic novel, your larger project is going to be based on. And you get that in front of people. And having that small thing that isn't the whole complete project in front of people and being able to describe it to them, you can tell just by their reactions. And you can learn a lot from their reactions, because it isn't just, yes, they like it, no, they don't. You can kind of hear what parts of the pitch that they lean into, what parts they don't seem as interested in. I've had pitches that were definitely longer than an elevator pitch, and over time I kind of honed it down. Like in my graphic novel Eye of the Gods, which I talk about in that video, I talk about ultraviolet radiation and how it affects people's visions, and there's technology where they're cloning people's eyeballs so that they no longer have to wear glasses anymore or have laser surgery. They just clone your own DNA and grow new eyeballs that are resistant to the effects of aging and radiation, and they replace your eyes. Now, that whole thing is a very important setup, and it's important to the plot of the story. But the way I pitch Eye of the Gods when I'm at conventions is that it's a psychological thriller about a man who's cursed with visions he can't control. He can look through other people's eyes. He can see what they see, but he can't control when or where. He witnesses a murder, only to find out it's being reported in the news as a death by natural causes. That's the pitch that I give now for Eye of the Gods. The stuff about the cloning and the environment and radiation, that's all stuff that I found over time that wasn't what interested people. What interested people is, what is happening to this main character? What's his problem? What's he struggling with? And the thing about the visions really gets to the heart of the story, because that's really what it's about. So that can also inform your writing process. You may learn as you go that there's details that you may start pitching people that aren't as interested in. It doesn't mean that you should drop them from the story altogether, but also may inform how strongly you lean on those. What are the things that you do want to move to the forefront of the story? So that's one of the best ways to really get validation and get in front of people, find out whether your book, people will tell you. That's it. Just get in front of people and tell them about your book. And if you're not going to comic conventions, maybe it's something like writing a short story and putting it online. Maybe it's doing a one-shot and putting it up on Comixology or on some other services using using something like, I forget what Kablam's print-on-demand individual comic selling site is, but they have a service where you can also sell individual print comics that way. So if you're not going to necessarily do the whole series, you can just make one issue, have it ordered print on demand so you don't have to do all the fulfillment. It could be doing pinups of your characters and writing short bios or short prose stories about them to go along with the artwork. There's all kinds of things you can do, like tons of concept art or sketchbooks. Like I also mentioned, I do sketchbooks not just as ashcans of my series, showing my rough pencils and layouts, but for Morningstar, I did a sketchbook that was full of my original character designs, and like I said, bios, short bios about the characters and the world and the story development that I went through. Taking those things and putting them online to share with people and seeing their reactions, some people, and here's the thing you have to remember. There may always be people that will either just nicely be like, no, I'm not interested. There may be people out there that are jerks. They're going to say, you suck, or they're not into it, or this is stupid. Why are you putting that out there? One, that really is the minority. People don't generally go out, as much as horrible as the internet can seem sometimes, for the most part, people don't generally go out of their way to hurt other people. Most people will simply just say nothing. If their parents raised them right, they learned that they can't say something nice, they don't say anything at all. So, other than internet trolls, most people are generally going to be pretty nice about it. What you really want is the constructive criticism, where people may say, hey, I see what you're trying to do here with this. Have you thought about doing that? Or, I don't necessarily care about this aspect of the character, or maybe there's something you put in here that, this is a little bit offensive. Have you considered looking at it from a different standpoint and seeing how this could be problematic? And these are all things that, as creators, we need to be willing to listen to, because it's going to make us better and stronger. Now, if you have a really good reason for having something in your story that some people might have a problem with, then it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pull it out of the story, but it means you should understand how what you're saying affects other people, and you need to decide whether that's the effect you want to give. But this whole thing is about really just finding out, what are people going to think about my book or my project, my comic? And there's only so much of getting, going around in our heads where we're trying to figure out whether it's right or not, and learning how to properly assess the quality of your own work is a tool that you need to develop as a creator. But only so much of that will get you so far. At a certain point, you need to see how the work actually interacts with other people. That's where you really learn a lot. It's just putting it out there in the world. Because, again, there's some books, like let's say 50 Shades of Grey. I'm not the target audience for that book. I haven't read it. I've talked to some people that read it and didn't think it was that good. But that said, the book is an incredible bestseller, and it spawned a series of films. You may have something that may be really marketable. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. You might have something that's a work of genius. It's like a James Joyce level brilliant book, but it might not necessarily be accessible, and people might not necessarily want to read it. Those are things that you can't predict. You kind of have to create the work and put it out there and see how people actually react to it. And a lot of times doing short stories or doing things that are about the world, or kind of testing those ideas out and seeing how people react to those early bits, those are the things that can give you the idea of what you want to do with the project. Do you want to go forward with it? How do you want to change it going forward based on that feedback? Thanks for watching. If you enjoy these videos, please like and share them. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. You can sign up for my weekly newsletter to get a free digital comic at newsletter.jeremy.net. That's newsletter.jeremy.net. jeremy.imi.net. Also, visit my main website, jeremy.net, where you can buy my comic books, art prints, and more. There's also links to my Instagram, Twitter, and other social media accounts. That's it for now. Go be creative.